He's a late-night satirist primarily, but many of his viewers, most of whom are relatively young, believe him to be the best source of trustworthy news in America.
We're joined now by impressionist Steve Nallon, who was the voice of Margaret Thatcher in Spitting Image. That might come as a surprise to many that the voice of Margaret Thatcher was a man, but there you go. So you're clearly a fan of Jon Stewart. What's made him such a success over all these years?
And the thing about Jon was he had great authority. So when he spoke, he spoke with that authority in his voice, but also he understood what the story was and what the idea behind the story was. And one of our problems, I think, is that if you want to be good at satire, you've actually got to get to the kernel of the truth that the story's about.
Surveys have shown that more liberals in America trust him as a news source than they do channels like CNN and NSBC.
Well, that's because he found the truth that was there. I mean, sometimes Spitting Image got it wrong a lot, but sometimes Spitting Image found a truth in the character. Often, Spitting Image played the man, not the ball, and actually had a go at the personalities rather than the ideas. But occasionally they got the ideas across as well, and took those ideas and made them funny. It's just very, very difficult to do. It's very easy. I mean, in today's climate, it's not that difficult to take posh man David Cameron and have a go at him. For being incredibly posh, we've got to find a way of doing that and solve Nick Clegg's problem. And you kind of go at the voice and all the rest of it. The same in Ed Miliband, you just get the adenoidal thing. But we're not really playing with the ideas that are behind them, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't know what the ideas are. The thing about David Cameron is, somebody told me this that worked with him, before he does an interview, he often turns to his advisor and says, what is it that I think? And if you don't have a Prime Minister that has an ideology, then how do you make jokes about the ideology?
So you're saying that there's been a death of satire in this country since Spitting Image was on 19 years ago now, because the politicians are just too bland?
Well, we've had fun politicians. I always rather like the idea of having Anne Widdecombe, and John Prescott would have been good. But the thing about that, I was thinking about this the other day, the thing about that generation of the 80s and also the 60s to some degree, there were a post-war generation, people like Roger Law and Peter Flock that created Spitting Image. They came from a post-war generation that wanted Britain to be better in the latter half of the century than it had been in the first half. And frankly, they got disappointed and angry. And that's sort of what makes true satirists. People who've got ideals and then they look at the reality and they get angry that there is a lack of justice. And what I would say to young satirists is learn to care. Learn to care about the world and don't be cynical about it. John Lloyd used to say to me, who produced Spitting Image, he said, I don't like the word satire at all, because Spitting Image isn't satire, it's to the rich and famous. Nothing wrong with that, and on a Sunday night it was great fun to go to the rich and famous, but that's possibly ultimately all it was.
So do you think we need a kind of Jon Stewart character in this country to expose politicians and the establishment perhaps for what some people think it is?
I think so. We've got Charlie Brooker, Chris Morris, and they do great work. The famous cultural guy Marshall McLuhan said that the medium is the message. So in the thick of it, the Prime Minister was essentially an offstage character because what mattered was the message and how the message was got across. And that's the problem of the world that we live in today. In politics, it's murky because we don't quite know what the ideals behind the politicians are. It's an old expression, but say what you like about Thatcher, we knew where she stood ideologically, and also we knew where Kinnock stood and Michael Foot and so on. But nowadays, it's much more difficult.
I've got to ask you, as you mentioned her, the voice that you did, Margaret Thatcher. Tell us in your best Margaret Thatcher voice what she would make of today's politics.
Oh, today's politics is very, very tough. But you've got to be a conviction politician. You see, the problem with David Cameron is he's too friendly. He's far too friendly. He's a sort of man that would call John the Baptist Jack. You don't want that. You want to go for the juggler and sort them out.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Bring back Spitting Image is all I can say. Thank you for your time today. Don't think anyone listens to me, I'm afraid.
Not
Thank
me.
you.
One of this century's most iconic cartoons could be about to change forever. Harry Shearer, the voice of some of the Simpsons' main characters like Mr. Burns and Ned Flanders, says his contract hasn't been renewed. So what does this mean for the future of the 25-year-old show?
You're never bored painting the Lord.
Copying it isn't difficult, creating it is.
Steve Nallon was the voice of Margaret Thatcher on Spitting Image and believes The Simpsons is safe as no one is irreplaceable.
Many people don't Homer Simpson. I do a little version myself. Oh, but you'll find dozens, if not hundreds, on the internet that are like that. And yeah, the geeks and the fans will find it probably difficult, possibly for the first couple of episodes, and your brain gets used to the new one very, very quickly.